Welcome back to the Purple Political Breakdown. How's it going? How's your day been? We are back at it again. I'm actually doing this again because my mic was muted for 40 minutes. So I have to redo everything that I talked about. But we gotta do what we gotta do. We're back at it again. As always, my motto is political solution without political bias. Yes, my values lean towards not liking what MAGA and Donald Trump have done recently, but we are now in a new age, so I will be making sure I do my due diligence to at the very least try to bridge as much as possible with Trump supporters because we have 4 years. There's nothing I can do. Now we gotta move forward. We gotta look for a better future. So today's episode, I have a lot that I want to talk about. I want to talk about domestic issues, talking about the federal education, talking about Trump's cabinet picks, and I want to talk about international issues, referencing Ukraine and Russia's continued escalation, Israel and Palestine, and so much more. Before we get into that, let's start off with some good news, because I want people to feel at least that everything doesn't suck, because there are very interesting and very good things to at the very least say that is taking place right now that you may not be thinking about. So first thing first, there's a malaria vaccine which has been delivered by a mosquito bite. So let me kind of frame what I'm referring to. Scientists, as of right now, have developed a new vaccination strategy for malaria, boosting immunity through bites from mosquitoes carrying a genetically engineered version of the parasite that causes malaria. So basically, the idea is they put certain things in these mosquitoes, so when the mosquito bites you, you get vaccinated for malaria. That is the idea, and I think that is genius. I really do think that's genius, and that could really help save a lot of people's lives. If you don't know, the biggest reason why humans die from like other creatures is a tiny little mosquito. Kills a lot of people. A lot of diseases it spreads considering it's a mosquito bite. There's a lot of them, very hard to keep track of. But if scientists can develop this vaccine into mosquitoes and hopefully make it in a way where the vaccine will continuously multiply as the mosquitoes have more and more offspring, the threat of mosquitoes will diminish quite a bit, at the very least when it comes to malaria. So I'm all for it. I think that is a really, really good thing to look forward to. Here's hoping that vaccination denialists, RFK, hopefully he likes the idea too and doesn't turn his back on a potential solution such as this. We'll see. Another bit of good news that I think we can, think positively with is Joe Biden. I know some groans I heard from both the populist left and the Republican side. Joe Biden has requested $100 billion in disaster relief funds. I think that is another good thing, right? So to kind of break down how this works, $40 billion will be for FEMA disaster relief fund. $24 billion will be for the agriculture department, which is obviously farming, nutrition programs. $12 billion would be for HUD grants to address damages. And $8 billion would be for transportation department to rebuild bridges and roads and stuff like that. So that is something that Joe Biden has requested from Congress. I feel like at the very least, we can all get on the same page that this money is to help America rebuild America and help its people. I know the growing rhetoric on the Republican side is using funds wisely. Well, there's nothing more wise than using funds to help the American people. So I feel like we can come together, have some bipartisanship, and all agree that this is a good thing for America to rebuild us, considering how bad that hurricane was. Apparently, there's a crazy cyclone that's taking place as well to help the people who are rebuilding their lives in these areas of climate destruction, right? So another bit of good news that we can all kind of get on favor with, okay? So with that said, we talked about some good things that are being worked on. But unfortunately, when it comes to politics, the good is far in between. So a conversation that I want to start off with is in regards to federal education. And the reason why I want to have a conversation in regards to federal education is I do believe there's a kind of a misguided idea on the role of the Department of Education in America. My last podcast episode, I broke down pretty intricately that when it comes to each state, the best states when it comes to quality of education, quality of staff, safety of students, and student success, those heavily lean Democrat states. Like there's not a average where it's equal. No, the 10 best states, or more specifically, 9 out of the 10 best states when it comes to public education are Democrat. 9 of the 10 worst states when it comes to public education are Republican. So I looked that up, I found this information, and I noted it. I told the people what the truth is. And after some feedback and after some kind of disagreement with facts, which is kind of wild, I was told that, well, it's still the Department of Education's fault that these Republican states are doing so poorly. So my next step of action is to find out exactly what does the Department of Education do? What role does it play in terms of education throughout the United States of America? And I looked it up, I tried to find out what the responsibilities are, and this is what I found out. So there are main responsibilities for the Department of Education. Not speaking on any potential policies that may have taken place, but their role, what they do, and everything that they have done up until now can obviously have further conversation, but their main responsibilities in regards to education across America is far different than the expectation that people have. First things first is that they establish federal financial aid policies. I think that is pretty easy to understand. Financial aid is a big contributor on people going to school and higher education. For me, I definitely benefited it because I did not have the money to pay for it, regardless of how much scholarship money I got. So financial aid, unless you disagree with financial aid, I feel like we can all agree that that is a viable thing that the Department of Education should do. And getting rid of the Department of Education will obviously have to reroute how you do financial aid, which will be very interesting. They also monitor fund usage. So this is how much funds the federal government gives out to states to fund the schools. Now, I can tell you exactly how it works, but the better way to do it is to show you. So I will show you in a minute exactly how much funding as of 2023, this is where this chart is made, how much funding is given to each individual state. So here's the chart right here. This is the public education funding per K to 12 student from most to least federal funding. So this is funding per student. And I'm going to make a very obvious distinction that I think is also very important as well. So when it comes to federal funding, you have states like Alaska getting $4,000 per student, places like Wyoming getting $2,000, California getting $2,000, North Carolina getting $2,000, New York getting $2,000. For the most part, a lot of the funding, pretty relative. Some states get a lot, Alaska gets a lot, but this is also probably because they don't have a large population, I'm guessing. And other places don't get as much, but there's really not big gaps between the funding when you come to state. The lowest is Utah, and the most is Alaska. Everything else is between $1,500 and $2,800 per student per state. And I notice what exactly determines it. I'm guessing it's a variety of different factors. But if you go through each of these states, New York is a Democrat state. Very, very well. It does very well when it comes to public education. And it only gets $2,400. Ohio gets around the same amount of money, but Ohio is far worse when it comes to public education. Then you got states like Mississippi. They do terrible in public education, and they get more money. Again, another Republican state, same with Montana. So I've heard the point that more funding is leading these states to do worse. But these states that are getting more funding and are not doing well are Republican. So I'm very confused how blame is being put on the Department of Education for that. That's the state's fault for not using their funds properly. And a more important point in regards to funding is that only about 10 to 20% of funding for public education state by state is from the federal government. Almost 80% of the funding is state, local, or private organizations in the state. So most of the funding is from your local area, which is why you see a state like Alaska, $4,000 per student, but $16,000 per student from their state and local funding. You see a state like West Virginia, $2,000 or $3,000 per student from the federal government, $13,000 per student from the state and local government. You see a state like Vermont, $2,800 from federal government, $24,000 from their state and local. So most of the funding that goes to these areas are from state and local government. So blaming the federal government for funding allocation is misleading, and it doesn't tell the full picture. If anything, if you really want to tell a bigger picture, you should blame your states for the funding that they give, because they give most of the funding. And there's no gap between the funding that the federal government gives state to state. It's relatively the same across the board. But all right, we got that out of the way. When it comes to funding, when it comes to funding for states, the states are funded mostly from their own state government. Around 80% of the state funding is from their state itself. So blaming the Department of Education makes no sense. Now, another thing the Department of Education oversees is research. Obviously, pays attention to what the students are doing on a national level, identifying key educational issues that may be taking place in America, and ensuring equal access of education throughout the country. Also very fair things that the federal government should be doing. Another thing is that they enforce anti-discrimination statutes. They make sure you guys are not racist, sexist, and everything in between. Also another fair thing the Department of Education does. But you know something that the federal education does not do to states? They do not decide curriculum. There is no national standard for education curriculum in America. Curriculum is decided state by state. So what is being taught and how it's being taught in schools are decided from your state government, from your local government. So after compiling all the information, getting all the evidence, and getting the full picture of the role of the Department of Education, here is my conclusion. That when it comes down to it, the fault of poor public education is the fault of the states and the people in the local area. And the reason why Republican states are doing so terribly in public education compared to Democrat states is not the fault of the Department of Education, it's the default of your state government and your local government. The officials you chosen in the state you live in is the fault of your poor education. And this is not an opinion. This is just a fact. I want every state in America to have education on equal footing. But if we turn back the block and make it full 100% state autonomy in terms of deciding education, the states that are Republican are only going to get worse. There is no actual plan for them to get better. What are you going to tell me? You're going to change the curriculum? Then do it. There's no national curriculum standard. What are you going to tell me? You're going to give more funding? Then do it. Most of the funding is based on states. So the discrepancy between Democrat states who have way better public education than Republican states is going to grow. And the divide in terms of education for Democrats and Republicans is also going to grow. This is actually not a good thing. There's no unilateral kind of what's the word? Not I'm forgetting what the word I want to say, or I don't have the word in mind. But there's no cohesion. We're just dividing ourselves more if we go with this idea that we don't need any federal standards, we don't need any the federal government to oversee education. It's gonna make things worse, and I'm just telling you how it is. So we will see. I'm still skeptical of whether or not Donald Trump is really going to get rid of the Department of Education, but we'll see how everything takes place. But these are just the facts, and these are just the truth. And if you want to look up any of this stuff for yourself, I'm making a concerted effort moving forward to put all my sources in the description of the podcast episode. So if you watch or listen to my full podcast episode, all the links will be in the description. I'm trying my hardest to make sure I'm including all the links so all of you guys can look it up yourself. I'm not hiding anything. So let's move on from the Department of Education and talk about something known as the nonprofit killer bill. So the nonprofit killer bill is something that was kind of ringing around a lot of advocacy groups. I think over 150 groups opposed this bill. Over 150 tax-exempt groups opposed this bill. And the fear is that with this bill, H.R. 9495, it will grant the president broad authority to target nonprofits deemed terrorist-supporting organizations. Ultimately, based on what Donald Trump has said, he made it a point of clarification when he was talking about what things he will do when he becomes president, that he targeted these pro-Palestinian movements. Now, personally, my opinion is that these pro-Palestinian movements can get unhinged sometimes, and there is legitimate worry that potential actual terrible people are infiltrating these organizations to push very faulty rhetoric. It's very possible, and it's definitely a realistic concern. But to create blanket declarations that these organizations are terrorist supported organizations could be very dangerous. Now, what defines a terrorist organization technically, or the following, is that they have to commit an act of bodily injury or something that would cause death to be a terrorist activity. They got to prepare or plan the activity. They have to gather information on potential targets for the activity. They have to garner funds for the activity. And these are all important aspects of being a terrorist organization or terrorist supporting organization. So the conversation moving forward is what would be the threshold? What would be the bars of evidence that would determine if these organizations are terrorist supporting or terrorist organizations in general? And if they are groups that are advocating for Palestine, okay. But if they are groups espousing rhetoric from Hamas, well, that's when it gets very dicey, right? And he's potentially declared that these organizations and these people will be deported from the country, which is wild. So we have to find bars of evidence to determine the validity of these claims. Right now, this bill failed under a 2/3 majority, but it may pass with a simple majority. There's a lot of pro-Israel groups that support the bill. And if Donald Trump is in office, I could see a lot of MAGA and Republicans, considering he controls every branch of government, also supporting the bill. So it potentially gives Donald Trump a lot of unvetted power, which can be dangerous. So basically, the idea for people, to put it very simply, is H.R. 9495, known as the Nonprofit Killer Bill, is very concerning for organizations because they believe that it will give Donald Trump, the President of the United States, unvetted power to consider these organizations terrorist supporting, potentially not only throwing them in jail, but also throwing them out the country. And the question is, will he have valid evidence or will he just make baseless claims? And the concern is Donald Trump is very good at making baseless claims. You guys remember it, right? They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. He does it quite a bit. So we will see how this kind of takes place, but this could be very dangerous, could be in the future. Another thing that is something that is taking place that is kind of like a fight against Donald Trump and his administration is Los Angeles is one very influential city that is becoming a sanctuary city. If you don't know what a sanctuary city is a city that is sanctuary for immigrants. Pretty simple. Now, there's a looming conversation that is taking place in social media. The looming conversation is that these places are housing illegal immigrants that are criminals. There's no provable claims for this. That's not true, but it is possible that there could be a criminal that sneaks there. You know, there's always one bad apple amongst thousands of people. So what do these sanctuary cities do? Well, they will protect immigrants from deportation. They're a safe place for these immigrants, of course. And the reason why these cities care about immigrants is kind of multifaceted. One, they do contribute to the workforce. They do jobs that people don't want to do. And the second part is that they contribute to the economy. I know you've been told that they don't contribute to taxes, but a lot of these companies, a lot of these immigrants do contribute to ITNs, which is still money that is given to the government. So they help with these state economies. They are a very important workforce. And these people are not just people who jumped in the border, went to California, and went like, hey, protect me. No. People who are unauthorized immigrants in the United States of America are people who are here waiting for the legal process to be official. That is it. People who are not here under any legal process are sent back over the border, and people who are criminals are also sent back over the border. The people who are here are people who are waiting for their application for asylum. They're waiting for their temp status to be, done, which is people who are coming to the country after getting kicked out due to some regime. There are people who are brought here through trafficking means, and there are DACA, children of people who are brought here from illegal immigrants. So unauthorized immigrants are people who have reason to be here or who are just waiting for the process. So those are the people that they are protecting. Now, they did make it a point to note this, which is very important to consider, is that they allow confidential handling of migrant status, but honors warrants from judges. Although they are making a stance against the federal government to try to protect immigrants who are here for a purpose, they do note that if you are a criminal and a judge got a warrant, you're gone, buddy. You're out of here. And I'm all for that. I'm not advocating for criminals. I never will. So, amen. It's fair. And this is the state doing it. I'm curious. So the people who are joining MAGA, the people like Elon, the people like Vivek, one of the principles that they've been saying consistently is that they have made it their mission to limit the federal government's power, provide more power within the states. Well, if a state decides to do this, they want to protect their immigrants. Why get involved? How is the federal government able to deport people that California said no? It should be a state-by-state decision. Just let the Republicans get rid of all their immigrants. But these Democrat states, if they want to keep them, why not? Just raising the conversation. Another thing that I want to bring to the table, ladies and gentlemen, speaking of Donald Trump again, I need to transition better. My transitions need to be a lot better, right? I need to be locked in. Is that there is more Donald Trump cabinet picks. Now, I'm not going to go too much in depth because I only care about the people who are confirmed. But I at the very least tell you some of the people that are nominated. The first one to bring to the table is obviously the most controversial as of right now. Matt Gaetz, who was nominated to be Attorney General. Now, if you're not caught up, why Matt Gaetz sucks is because there's an investigation on allegations including sexual misconduct, drug use, and obstruction. And there's allegations that this man was getting tipsy, getting getting very loosey-goosey, and he messed with a 17-year-old girl. That's the allegations going on right now, and this dude's an old dude. So, Matt Gaetz, he kind of knew that he was cooked. And before the report had any official bearing on whether or not it will get released to the public, he did the wise thing that every puppy should do. They listened to their master and got out of here. Matt Gaetz withdrew. He didn't want the position. He knew he was cooked, so he got out of there. Smart man. Because of this, Donald Trump has elected loyalist Pam Bondi, former Attorney General from Florida, to be the U.S. Attorney General. So, seems like she's going to be in the role now that Matt Gaetz has withdrew. Some of the other people is the Office of Management and Budget Director, Russ Vaught. Now, what makes Russ Vaught very interesting is because Russ Vaught served in the role in the latter part of the first Trump administration. So he was in this role before for Trump's administration before. And he was involved in writing the Conservative Heritage Foundation Project 2025, which contains a detailed blueprint for the next Republican president to usher in a sweeping overhaul of the executive branch. So this man was involved with Project 2025 and writing things in Project 2025 and has been given the position in the government to do one of the things that the Project 2025 said it was going to do. Ensure that the executive branch is filled with Trump loyalists. So now that we know that a guy from Project 2025 is a part of Trump's administration yet again, my question to you, Mega, can we admit that Trump is part of Project 2025 or not? I'm curious. I want to hear thoughts. We will see how everything plays out and whether this guy gets improved. U.S. Ambassador to NATO, he chose Matthew Whitaker. This guy has no international experience, but he was Trump's former attorney general. The Secretary of Education. Oh, this is a doozy. This is a doozy. Do you smell that? Do you smell that? Do you smell what The Rock is cooking? What? Acknowledge me. I'm a fan of the WWE. The WWE has people like Roman Reigns, who, as a fellow Samoan, I want to have a body like Roman Reigns. I want to be a 40-year-old looking jacked and clean. I want to look like a Greek god like Roman Reigns. Also, shout out my boy, Cody Rhodes, my current favorite wrestler, the American Nightmare. Why am I talking about the WWE, you may ask? Why am I going on this tangent, you may ask? Well, it's very simple. The Secretary of Education, the nomination was Linda McMahon. You heard me right. Linda McMahon, the wife of Vince McMahon. So, if you were caught up with all the drama, you realize that Vince McMahon has some crazy allegations. Okay. Linda McMahon. You know what I find interesting? And I don't personally do this, but I'm curious if the energy will be kept the same. Throughout Kamala Harris's election campaign, there were some really weird Republicans and MAGA supporters who were saying that she got busy, got dirty, got in the bed sheets to get where she's at. She slept her way to the top. They were showing images of her with Diddy, even though Donald Trump had images with Diddy and Jeffrey Epstein, but doesn't matter. And they were saying that she was a corner worker. I wonder what they think about Linda McMahon. I wonder what they think about Linda McMahon. Just asking questions because she's in charge of the education of your kids. Hey, man, we'll see how that kind of works. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid System Administrator, Dr. Mehmet Oz. He was a heart surgeon and TV personality. Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, who is a billionaire, by the way. So more elites in government. So we got the richest man in the world. We got another rich, influential man in Vivek. We got billionaire Howard Lutnick. Got a lot of very elite individuals in government. Very, very wealthy individuals in government. Would this be the deep state? Let me know. Let me know. I don't know, man. I don't know. And those are the important people to kind of bring to the conversation. Before I move on to international politics, I do want to bring this up. Okay, so Cenk Uygur, my boy, Cenk Uygur. We're not boys. I don't even know why I said that. Cenk went on social media recently, and the reason why I'm calling this out is because the left is in a very peculiar place as of recently. And he said some very interesting things on the platform known as Twitter. And he had some very interesting conversations. So I want to show you exactly what I'm referring to. So let's go here. So Cenk Uygur sent a couple messages. On November 18th, Cenk messaged Elon saying, "Hey Elon Musk, put me in charge of the Pentagon. I'll slash $400 billion easy. That'll get you 20% of your goal of $2 trillion right out the gate. I went to Wharton 3 years before you. I own a media company, so I know how to run a business. If you really want to cut, put me in, coach." So he called Elon coach. He went out, reached out to Elon to be a part of the administration. Okay. He also said, Donald Trump Jr. also replied to something Cenk said to kind of see the whole thread. Elon said specific suggestions are welcome. Cenk said, "As you know, you need to see the line items in the budget, but I have one suggestion already. The generals are not allowed to get a job with defense contractor for 10 years. They authorize so much wasteful spending because they're going to get hired by those same companies." Donald Trump Jr. said this is a great idea that has to be discussed. Then Cenk retweeted this, saying, "While the left is yelling at me not to work with MAGA, here's Donald Trump Jr. saying we should limit generals from working for defense contractors. There's a policy that we've been pushing for and gotten nowhere with Democrats on. Who cares who does it as long as it gets done?" Okay? He also says, Elon Musk to put me in charge of cutting the Pentagon, and he said, "What are your suggestions? I run the largest left-wing network online, and a Democratic leader has never asked me that question. The idea that they would take advice from a populist is disdainful to them." So, criticize the Democrats, working with MAGA, and he kind of qualified everything. And I'm going to show you what I mean. He actually answered on a video on a conversation with David Pacman and Destiny. I need to have a podcast episode with both of those individuals. All right. So, I'm going to show you the conversation. Make sure that this is being used properly. Put on my headset. And let's roll. Make sure this is up a little bit. 65. So let me show you guys, ladies and gentlemen. And if you're listening to this, I'm about to show the video, but you'll be able to hear it here if you're listening to the full podcast episode. But this is Cenk Uygur with Destiny and David answering why he did what he did.
Viral for responding to Elon Musk and saying, "Hey, put me in charge of slashing that Pentagon budget." Elon actually replied. He asked for suggestions. Don Jr. replied something like, "This is being considered," or "it was considered." Destiny, you responded to the entire thing by saying sigh, S-I-G-H. I think my first question to you, Cenk, is, do you think they genuinely want to cut defense spending, or this entire Department of Grifty Edgelords thing is just really about cutting social programs at the end of the day? Or do you really think the Pentagon is something they would cut?
So let's look at this conversation, right? So, um, first of all, why do I call Trump a fake populist?
I'm gonna
It's
have to move
because
past this because
he
he's
goes
answering a different question
Miriam
here.
Adelson. He put, and then he gave her four offense. I've never seen that happen before. So that's where all the pork goes, because if you question that pork, they go, "You're endangering our national security. You're putting all of our lives on the line, etc." So they stuff it full of pork. So I said, "Look, guys, if you're going to do cuts, let's start at the Pentagon. I can cut 400." So that's where all the people, even on the right wing, go, "Yeah, that sucks," and that
Actually,
Mary
let me start it
Adelson.
from the top.
He put in Marco Rubio, Elise Stefanik, Mike
All right,
Waltz,
here we
John
go.
Huckabee, all
Listen up.
Team Miriam, neocon warhawks. So what happened? I thought you were anti-war. And part of what I'm doing here is some of the right-wing populists actually do agree with us on some issues. So, for example, anti-corruption. When I point out that Miriam Adelson gave Trump $137 million, and then he gave her four appointees, people even on the right wing go, "Yeah, that sucks," and that we don't agree with Trump there, and that's a stunning turn of events. I've never seen that happen before, but it's actually genuinely happening online, and you should give them some credit for that. Now, on
My only issue with that is how much does that mean? How much does that actually mean anything? Disagreeing with Trump there, but still listening and blindly following Trump. What is the value of this disagreement? Sounds a little copy, but we continue.
on uh, on cutting, what I'm asking is, do you guys really mean it? And so, if you really mean it, most of the corruption is in the Pentagon. So that's where all the pork goes, because if you question that pork, they go, "You're endangering our national security. You're putting all of our lives on the line, etc." So they stuff it full of pork. So I said, "Look, guys, if you're going to do cuts, let's start at the Pentagon. I can cut $400 billion overnight for you." And what it's doing is putting them to the test. Do you really mean it or don't you? And so a couple of surprising things happen from there. First of all, if you look at my comment section, right wing populists actually do mean it. So this is going to be really, really interesting. So then Elon and Don Jr. say, "Yeah, yeah, we mean it too," and they follow through on at least one of the proposals that I mentioned, which was, hey, a lot of these contracts go to these defense contractors because the generals, after they retire, go to work for those defense contractors, and that gives them an incentive to sell us out and to buy all these bloated programs, because they're literally going to get paid by those same companies. And if they say, "Yes, you're right," which is where they are today, and we should stop that, so that conflict of interest, well, that's a left wing position that we've been arguing for 20 years. I'll take it. That's fantastic. And that's the unity that mainstream media pretended that they were in favor of, but only when they were doing corporate deals for tax cuts for the rich, etc. Now we have some potential actual unity. At the same time, I'm not a sucker. I've been in this game a long time. So is it possible that they don't cut the Pentagon and instead they cut social spending? Of course, of course, that's more likely, right? But at least the very first conversation we're having online about what to cut is the Pentagon. Perfect. You can't ask for anything better from the left wing populist way of looking at it.
So, Destiny, tell us about the reason for the sigh. Is it that you think
Based off what everything that has happened, and based on I wasn't showing the reaction. I only showed the audio. My apologies. But I was listening to it, and based on Jink's points that he was making, the only thing that I want to say is that I hear you. I hear you. I don't believe in MAGA either, and I don't believe in Donald Trump. But I am required to be open minded. Required. And I think that's Jink's approach. Initially, I was disappointed as well. And I do question Jink and whether or not he's willing to turn a blind eye in some of the things that Donald Trump wants to do to accomplish his goal in cutting spending in the Pentagon. If you know that Donald Trump was going out of his way to give up Ukraine, to deport illegals or to deport immigrants, Would you just turn your blind eye and follow in line? Very interesting. It's hard to measure what is in the best interest of America. At this point, we gotta make the foundation of our principles the core of who we are, but also being able to bridge the gap between the chaos. Isolate who you are and make that isolation your way to become the bridge for all these differing groups. I do want to talk to Destiny, and maybe I'll send a super chat or one of these days, and I'll set something up where I have a conversation with Destiny on his current trajectory, on where his alignment is, because I do want to have that conversation with him, because he is diminished MAGA, which fair. He's diminished the radical left, the populist left, fair. He's done these things. He said he doesn't want to associate with MAGA. He says he wants to separate the Democrats from the radical left. But if the people see these different things that we know are loud noise with no true foundational principles, why do you align yourself to anything at all? Why don't you isolate yourself from it altogether? Why don't you make a new vision, especially with his current notoriety and impact, a new vision of what political principles should be? Because right now, the populist left wing who want to lean socialist and love their identity politics, and the radical right wing is also populist and leaning into certain kind of fascist tendencies. Neither of them seem ideal, but both of them seem like they embody Americans right now. And if you're not a part of those groups, and you're not a part of like a realistic center like me, or even Destiny, then you're just a person who doesn't care about politics. And I don't blame you, because it's insanity right now. So that's a conversation that I'm sure me and Destiny will have one day. When it will happen, we will see. But I'm sure it will happen at some point. Unfortunately, I can't clip this up because I did not add Jenk's video to it because I'm an idiot. But at the very least, I'm sure people heard that, which is good. But let's move on to some more international conflict, shall we? So, first international conflict we have to talk about, ladies and gentlemen, is Ukraine and Russia. So there has been a lot of things happening as of recently. So it starts out with Biden approving. He has intensified Russian missile strikes from Ukraine and Russia. So he's approved missile strikes in Russia. Weird wording, but he improved it. Ukraine responded by sending ATACMS missiles targeting Russian facilities in Bryansk. Because of this, Putin said that he's going to lower the threshold for nuclear weapons in response, because Ukraine is using American missiles to attack in Russia soil. One of the I forget what his title was. One of the officials of Russia warned of escalation if U.S. missiles keep on targeting Russia territory. So Putin is threatening Russia. Putin is threatening the United States and the Ukraine allies with nuclear weapons if Ukraine doesn't stop attacking Russian territory. Very interesting. This decision came after Russia launched a barrage of its own missiles in Ukraine Sunday, November 17th. Authorities said 10 people, including 2 children, were killed because of these missiles and a dozen injured. So this comes off the back of Russia sending a whole bunch of missiles in Ukraine and also launched another attack in that same day. But Russia doesn't care. And this threat, honestly, a lot of the leaders said, I don't believe you. So U.S. leaders, UK leader and some other European leaders were like, this is chatter. This is bluff. You ain't fooling us. Well, with that said, ladies and gentlemen, Russia sent over a nuclear capable ballistic missile on Thursday in the latest escalation in the Ukraine war. So they sent over a missile, a ballistic missile, which is a rocket-propelled, self-guided strategic weapon system that follows a ballistic trajectory to deliver a payload from its launch site to a predetermined target. And these ballistic missiles can carry nuclear ammunition. And Putin sent that in Ukraine. So it's getting fiery, ladies and gentlemen. And with the recent conflicts and with Donald Trump becoming president, we will see if he can stop it. What will Donald Trump do? These are very interesting conversations. Also, Joe Biden also sent anti-personnel landmines to Ukraine as well for self-defense, of course. Yeah, kind of crazy. Something that we got to pay attention to consistently in terms of Ukraine and Russia, and whether or not Putin has the line, whether or not he's going to walk over it and start using nukes. We shall see. Next, let's go into another international conflict because it's not peaceful around the world. The ICC, I think it's called the International Court something. I don't remember the full name. Has officially implemented warrants for the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu, former defense minister Yoav Gallant, and Hamas commander Mohammed Diab. The crimes are war crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity are the crimes that is under these three individuals. They're accused of biased Eurocentrism and a lack of enforcement effectiveness. Hamas leader Diab, who said Israel was killed in a July airstrike, is accused of having a key role in the murder, the rape, and torture during the October 7th attack. Netanyahu and Gallant are accused of instigating widespread starvation by restricting food and humanitarian aid and intentionally targeting civilians in Gaza, where the death toll has passed 44,000. So the ICC means business. Now, does this mean anything? No, it doesn't. And honestly, it just really does not. Ultimately, ICC has no real influence in this conflict. And what I mean by that is because they have no jurisdiction in Israel or even the United States, all of this is just hollow threats. They can only propose their punishments on countries that recognize the ICC. So it doesn't mean anything, but for a talking point and a conversation point, you can 100% make the argument that internationally, they have officially called this genocide. Internationally, they officially call this war crimes. It makes me think, the conversation, so complicated. So complicated. And we want a ceasefire. We've been wanting a ceasefire for so long. And they actually voted on another ceasefire. The UN did. And the U.S. actually vetoed. The U.S. vetoed it because they impose a unconditional ceasefire unless hostages held by Hamas are released. Resolution called for a return of Hamas hostages and Palestinian civilians, Israeli military withdrawal from Gaza, and support for UNRWA's humanitarian operations. So unless these hostages are officially released, the U.S. will not agree to a ceasefire. This is so tricky. You would assume that this is as simple as Hamas release the hostages and Israel get out of Gaza. But it's not. It just is not. How this conflict will end, well, we'll see what Donald Trump does. But to kind of step out of the more grandiose and larger scale political issues, some points of conversation, more social issues that people might find interesting. Well, you guys are in for a doozy because some crazy things have happened as of the last year, actually. So there was an incident at a high school where there's a high school student who created AI images of nearly 50 female classmates. So he created AI images of new pics of his fellow classmates in the school. And the administration delayed mandatory reporting, leading to parents filing a lawsuit against the students, declaring them they need to resign from the position for not working fast enough at a specific date, but apparently some of them did not. And because of this, they're continuing the lawsuit. This is huge. And now there's a growing conversation that is taking place on laws regarding AI on the internet. As of right now, there's nothing clear. We are still consistently working on AI laws in America. There was a proposed legislation that includes criminalizing creation, distribution, and introducing platform liability, but that stuff is still kind of getting deliberated. It's insane though what AI can do, why it can make fake naked images of someone. I remember there was a recent situation with, I think her name is Bobby, who got a fake AI image of her being naked as well. And the fact that high school students can do this so easily really begs the question on the extent of what AI should and should not be able to do moving forward. Because there have been some crazy things that have been happening regarding AI recently. And just to name you a few, we had the AI that pretended to be someone that led to a teenager's suicide by pretending to be a character and kind of playing into his suicidal thoughts. We had the one AI that told someone to off themselves while they were asking for questions for homework. And now we have someone using AI to create nude images of high school students in his school. Hey, Nano Trump, I know you're creating a lot of new, random, unofficial agencies. You know, even though you're supposed to not create bureaucracies, you're kind of creating more bureaucracies. Create a bureaucracy for AI. We gotta really start paying attention to what AI has been doing recently, because although I do think it can help evolve humanity to the next stage, we gotta have the proper ways to vet it, the proper ways to keep it secure. Another topic of conversation that has been happening a lot is that Rep. Nancy Mace opposed a transgender Congresswoman-elect Sarah McBride using a women's restroom, and House Speaker Mike Johnson enforces the bathroom usage by biological sex. The trans bathroom conversation, to me, like, why do you care so much? I'm gonna be honest. Why do Republicans care so much about people going to the bathroom? If this is a big deal, fine. But just have this trans woman, and she passes pretty well, give her own bathroom. Create a gender neutral bathroom. Because it's insane how much this triggers y'all. You guys are grown adults complaining and whining about someone using the bathroom. Like, why is someone using the bathroom all over my social media feed? Do you guys have nothing better to do than go like, yeah, you have a dick, you can't use my bathroom? Like, is that what politics is nowadays? Like, I get it when it's like adults and children. I get it. You guys are all adults. You have stalls. Why do you care if this trans woman uses a stall in the bathroom? You're not gonna see her dick. Like, why? Why do you? What? I just like these conversations are so not important that it's ridiculous that people care about them so much. That's all I gotta say. I really could care less about this conversation, but that's all people are talking about recently. Another thing that I find very interesting, especially with RFK Jr. potentially getting his role, is Mpox. So Mpox is a new disease that started in Africa that has officially made its way to the United States. Now, fortunately, we haven't had any crazy cases of Mpox. There's two versions, Mpox Clade 1 and Mpox Clade 2. We've had Mpox Clade 2 since January 2024, 3,000 cases, but these are not lethal. These are not dangerous, but it's still not good to have them. We finally had our first official case of Mpox Clade 1, where a person came from Africa to California, and this person has officially been isolated from all human contact. Mpox Clade 1 could be a bit more dangerous and more lethal. Some of the symptoms are a painful rash, enlarged lymph nodes, fever, headache, and muscle back pain. You can transmit it by sexual contact, bodily fluids, lesions, respiratory particles, and contaminated objects. I'm not going to lie. What are lymph nodes? I'm going to look that up right now. Because if lymph nodes are what I think they are, clusters that are part of the contains where are they? Let me look this up. Because I was recently sick out of nowhere. And if lymph nodes. So the reason why I brought this, so I don't know exactly what lymph nodes affect, and I'm not going to take too long. But I recently got sick, and let me know if this sounds familiar to anybody. I recently got sick a couple months ago, a couple weeks ago. I don't remember. And out of nowhere, I had a sore throat, pretty annoying sore throat, and my ear was messed up. And I had hearing issues in my right ear. And I don't know why I was so sick. It took a while for me to recover. But is it possible I had Mpox? I don't know. I didn't have any rashes or anything, so I don't think so. But I definitely had fever and headache. And how to prevent it: avoid contact with infected individuals, receive both the Mpox vaccine doses. And that is the conversation I want to have, ladies and gentlemen. MAGA, let's have a conversation. When it comes to Mpox, now that it's in the United States, if there is a potentiality of Mpox growing in severity and affecting more people, especially Mpox Clade 1, and the fact that you have to get 2 vaccinations to deal with it, if RFK made it his mission to not make getting a vaccine mandatory and say that vaccines are not necessary, and this keeps on growing and growing and growing in America, what do we say? If Mpox becomes a pandemic, what do you think RFK Jr. should do with America? Genuinely curious to see your thoughts. Some other things that have been taking place. The DOJ requested Google to sell Google Chrome because they believe Google is monopolizing search engines. I don't even have a strong opinion on that personally, but we'll see what happens. And another very interesting thing. So there was a study, I think study is the best word, of human rights protections around the world. And every country got a rating for human rights. The United States was given a Global Rights Project grade of a 64, which is a D, not good. This placed the US as the 59th best scoring country in the world in terms of human rights. When comparing the US to its regional neighbors in America, it ranks 14th of 31 countries. It is also the 6th worst scoring country among Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development countries, which are sometimes taken to represent the developed countries. So we're the 6th worst out of the developed countries. What makes the United States so bad when it comes to human rights violations? Well, let me tell you. Extrajudicial killings. Since 2015, the U.S. scores a 0 widespread violations for extrajudicial killings, primarily due to police violence. Reports from Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch cite over 1,000 civilians' deaths annually, disproportionately affecting Black Americans. So one of the reasons why America's human rights grade is so low is because of police violence in America. That's one. The lack of federal program to track police killings and non-compliance with international standards on use of force laws exacerbate this issue. Also, that plays into it. Torture. So torture is another reason why we score so low. The U.S. scored a 0 for torture from 2018 to 2020, including mistreatment of prisoners and police repression. NGOs criticize the U.S. for falling to the line with the Convention Against Torture organization. And you think about our prison system, it's not as effective as it should be. Another reason why we're so low in human rights. Freedom of speech and press. In 2020, the U.S. scored 0 for free speech due to police violence against journalists and protesters during the Black Lives Matter protests. Arrests and violence targeting medics and legal observers were also reported. Legislative restrictions on protests in some states further undermine freedom of assembly. So freedom of speech and press is also why we're so low. Labor rights. Significant labor rights violations include barriers to unionization, poor workplace safety, and child labor, particularly in agriculture. Racial and social inequality, disproportionate use of force and systematic inequities in policing and incarceration, highlighting racial disparities in the U.S. Democratic backsliding. The U.S. was downgraded to anarchy in 2020 due to election-related violence, attempts to overturn democratic outcomes, and harassment of elected officials. NGO freedom. The U.S. scores poorly on NGO freedom with document instances of judicial targeting of human rights defenders, and with Vivek saying that they don't deserve federal funding as well. International compliance reporting, limited ratification of international rights treaties, inadequate data collection. Oh, a lot of stuff, ladies and gentlemen. America, the leader of the free world, the greatest country in the world. We can be better. But there's a lot of factors that we're not doing best in. And the best way to kind of characterize it is that as a country, we need to do better in having a police department that follows the rules and that is not unfairly treating people terribly. We need a better prison system that's not a hellhole. You know, it's actually there for reformation. We need to do better when it comes to political violence. I mean, someone tried to assassinate Donald Trump. People are burning ballots. We need to be better as a country. We're the United States of America. This is pathetic. I'm not gonna lie. This is pathetic. So I wanted to raise that to you guys as well. Before we wrap up, there's a few things that I want to bring to the table in regards to Donald Trump. A couple more Donald Trump clips on things that he will do. We'll react to it, and then we'll call today's show up, and that will be a wrap. We'll do another show on Saturday, actually. Don't know if I want to do a live or do I just want to record it. I probably will just record that one and then release the full thing like a normal podcast episode. We shall see. But all right, I'm about to pull up more things regarding Donald Trump and things that he said he is and he is not going to do. So here we go. Let's dive right into it. Here we go.
These gaping wounds are costing our country countless. Joe Biden
All right, we got the reaction page, so let's dive right into it.
has run up record trade deficits, also known as losses, higher than any president in history by far.
Didn't Donald Trump have a budget deficit, trade deficit, while we were under a booming economy?
These gaping wounds are costing our country countless jobs and trillions of dollars in wealth. One of my top economic priorities will be to stem this bleeding and put American workers on a level playing field. It's about time. And I must say, I did it 3 years ago, and they were doing great, but that's been blown out the window by the Biden administration. But to that end, I will pass landmark legislation that will be known as the Trump Reciprocal Trade Act. If India, China, or any other country hits us with a 100 or 200% tariff on American-made goods, we will hit them with the same exact tariff. In other words, 100% is 100%.
I feel like this is, again, empty. The reason why is none of these countries will do that unless Donald Trump does it first. And none of these countries will do that. So Donald Trump wants to do a 60% tariff on China. And they respond by doing a 100% tariff on America. And then we just do a 100% tariff on China. How is this going to help anything? Like, who is this benefiting? Who? Please tell me.
If they charge us, we charge them. An eye for an eye, a tariff for a tariff, same exact amount. One thing is going to happen. Probably they drop the tariff, but if they don't, that's okay. We'll take in plenty of money. Under the Trump Reciprocal Trade Act, other countries will have two choices. They will get rid of their tariffs on us, or they will pay us hundreds of billions of dollars, and the United States will make an absolute fortune. There will be no more unilateral economic surrender like we've done for many, many decades.
Trump really thinks that these countries pay these tariffs. He really thinks that. He really thinks that. And nobody checks him.
This will especially help our great farmers in Iowa and other agricultural states.
He said tariffs will help our farmers in Iowa. Don't forget when he put tariffs on China, how much that ruined the agricultural sector in America. A lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of money was lost. So, last time you tried to help agriculture, you ruined agriculture. Just putting that out there.
And it'll help our manufacturers all across the nation.
Right,
we will be
right.
knocking down barriers to American farm products, American dairy products, steel, just about everything you can think of. From all around the world, they take advantage of us, but no more. We must have fairness and reciprocity. That's the word, reciprocity. They do it to us, we do it to them. This will be a key part of our strategy to return jobs and wealth to the United States and launch an economic boom that will lift up our middle class and eliminate our dependence on China and other countries. And it's something that has been waiting to happen for a long time. We have been the whipping post for everyone else. We have been a country that was disrespected on trade and, frankly, disrespected on just about everything. No more. The Trump Reciprocal Trade Act. Thank you.
Okay, the Trump Reciprocal Trade Act. Yeah, we'll see how that kind of works out. Let's listen to this other thing.
To World War III than we are today under Joe Biden. A global conflict between nuclear-armed powers would mean death and destruction on a scale unmatched in human history. It would be nuclear Armageddon. Nothing is more important than avoiding that nightmare. We will avoid it, but we need new leadership. Every day this proxy battle in Ukraine continues, we risk global war. We must be absolutely clear that our objective is to immediately have a total cessation of hostilities. All shooting has to stop. This is the
how are you going to
central
do
issue.
that?
We need peace without delay. In addition, there must also be a complete commitment to dismantling the entire globalist neocon establishment that is perpetually dragging us into endless wars, pretending to fight for freedom and democracy abroad.
What are you talking about?
While they turn us into a third world country and a third world dictatorship.
Oh my God, he just be talking. What are you talking about?
Right here at home. The State Department, the defense bureaucracy, the intelligence services, and all of the rest need to be completely overhauled and reconstituted to fire the deep staters and put America first. We have to put America first. Finally, we have to finish the process we began under my administration of fundamentally reevaluating NATO's purpose and NATO's mission. Our foreign policy establishment keeps trying to pull the world into conflict with a nuclear-armed Russia based on the lie that Russia represents our greatest threat.
Now Russia doesn't represent our greatest threat. Very interesting. Very interesting. Now Russia doesn't represent our greatest threat. You see how things are changing? Now MAGA is becoming cool with Russia. They're trying to make, oh yeah, Russia's not a problem. Who cares they invaded Ukraine? Who cares that everybody has to listen to Putin or else? Who cares? Very interesting. Very interesting.
But the greatest threat to Western civilization today is not Russia. It's probably, more than anything else, ourselves. And
So, our greatest threat isn't Russia, but it's ourselves. Oh my God. Yo, he's really going to ally with our enemies, bro. He's going to ally with Russia and China, bro. Oh my. Oh my God. He didn't even say China. I was at least expecting China. He said ourselves. He's really going to, oh my goodness. I can't, bro. I can't. I can't. I can't. But whatever.
some of the horrible USA hating people that represent us. It's the abolition of our national borders. It's the failure to police our own cities. It's the destruction of the rule of law from within. It's the collapse of the nuclear family and fertility rates like nobody can believe is happening. It's the Marxists who would have us become a godless nation worshiping at the altar of race and gender and environment. And it's the globalist class that has made us totally dependent on China and other foreign countries that basically hate us. These globalists want to squander all of America's strength, blood, and treasure, chasing monsters and phantoms overseas while keeping us distracted from the havoc they're creating right here at home. These forces are doing more damage to America than Russia and China could ever have dreamed.
What? Who is he talking about? He mentioned globalist forces, but they're doing more damage. Who? Who are we talking about?
Evicting the sick and corrupt establishment is the monumental task for the next president. And I am the only one.
He's really making it a point. He's making MAGA believe that the problem with America is the Democrats. They're more evil. The Democrats are more evil than Russia and China. He's really selling that pitch, and people are buying it. So crazy to me, man. It's so crazy to me. It's so insane to me.
One who can do it. I'm the only one that can get the job done. I know exactly what has to be done.
And Alex Jones is gonna play into that because he's a freaking. Oh man, I try to be nice, but Alex Jones is a bot, bro. He's such a bot. I can't. I don't like Alex Jones. Just to keep it even, I also don't like Hassan. So there you go. Well, those are more Donald Trump speeches. It always hurts my brain anytime I listen to it, but we'll see how everything takes place. He wants to end conflict internationally. He thinks that people in America are worse than Russia and China. So, we'll see. He says he's the only one who can save America. Only one, man. He's the savior of mankind. We shall see. Well, a little bit of a dire note to end, ladies and gentlemen, but I hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast episode nonetheless. A lot of information to go through, a lot of conversation to talk about. I might not do the 1v1 conversation live. I might just record that and have a 1v1 conversation, but we'll see how that takes place. Well, with that said, I appreciate everybody who tuned in for today's episode. We will return to do another live sometime next week, obviously. With that said, hope you guys enjoyed. Y'all have a good one. Take care.